After 2 years of marriage, I finally got pregnant. However, my husband brought back an 8-year-old girl. 01 It was quite unexpected to find out that I was pregnant. The main contributor was a bowl of dumpling filling made by my mother. It was a bowl of filling that smelled fragrant with meat to her but made me feel nauseous and want to vomit continuously when I smelled it. I asked my mother if the dumpling filling had gone bad. My mother asked me if I was pregnant. I was completely confused and said, "What? Can pregnancy make the dumpling filling go bad?" My mother rolled her eyes and said, "It's true that a woman becomes scatterbrained during pregnancy for 3 years. There's no doubt about it." Me. Oh really? Thanks a lot. My mother was quick and decisive. She immediately put down the dumpling filling and took me to the hospital for an examination. The whole process was so quick that when I got the diagnosis report, I was still in a daze. I was actually pregnant. Ryan and I had been married for 2 years. In the first year, we deliberately took contraceptive measures. There was no other reason. We just wanted to enjoy the world of just the two of us a bit more. 2 months ago, under the request of both our parents, we finally gave in and started to create conditions for having a baby. I didn't expect that we would succeed so quickly as soon as we started creating the conditions. It was really immediate and the effect was remarkable. Although I didn't have any special feelings about having a baby before, when the baby really came, the spontaneous joy couldn't help filling my heart. Maybe this is maternal instinct. I called Ryan immediately but was prompted that his phone was turned off. I slapped my forehead and suddenly remembered that he should be on the plane back at this time. That he went on a business trip to France 3 days ago and was coming back today. I was so excited that I actually forgot about this. But I really wanted to share this good news with him. I thought he would surely be stunned at first, then be overjoyed, and then be at a loss. I had imagined countless reactions from Ryan after hearing the news, but I didn't expect that the real situation would be even more dramatic. I waited at home for 2.5 hours. At 4:27 in the afternoon, I received a call from Ryan. He said that he had got off the plane and asked me where I was at that time. I said that I was at home and couldn't help saying to him joyfully, "Come back quickly. I have good news to tell you." Ryan didn't respond to my emotion. Instead, he was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "I also have something to tell you." His tone wasn't good, which made my heart skip a beat. I asked him what it was. He said that he would tell me when he came back. His heavy tone messed up my mood. After hanging up the phone, I just felt as if there was a stone pressing on my heart, stuffy and unbearable. Ryan and I grew up together as childhood sweethearts. Although we had been separated in the middle, after so many years of getting along, we knew each other too well. As soon as he spoke, I knew that it was something that embarrassed him. And over the years, there were too few things that could embarrass Ryan. The last time was when we broke up. So this time, what was the reason? I joked to myself. Could it be that he wants to divorce me? It would be so ironic if he proposed to divorce me when I found out that I was pregnant. Ryan arrived home at 5:30 in the afternoon. With a beep sound from outside the door, the fingerprint unlocking was successful. It was Ryan. I suddenly stood up and walked to the entrance to wait for him. The door was pushed open from the outside. "You're back." My voice stopped abruptly, and even the smile on my face froze. What did I see? Ryan walked in holding a little girl's hand. Instantly, countless speculations flooded into my mind, but in the end, my mind went blank. Reflexively, I took 2 steps back and asked with full vigilance, "Who is she?" Ryan looked at me with a rather complicated look in his eyes. For a moment, I couldn't figure out what that look meant. He said, "Her name is Raina. She's 7 years old this year." I just felt as if my head had been struck hard by lightning. "Yours?" I almost squeezed these 2 words out between my teeth. Ryan quickly shook his head and said, "No." I admit that I breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time, my clenched hands slowly loosened. At this time, I began to look at the girl that Ryan was holding. She was clutching Ryan tightly with both hands, and most of her body was hiding behind him. Her eyebrows were lowered, her whole body was tense, and she looked very insecure. When I looked at her, she subconsciously trembled, and her hand holding Ryan clenched again. Ryan comforted her and said, "It's okay. Don't be afraid. This is Dad's wife." I suddenly raised my head to look at Ryan. I even doubted that I had heard wrong. "What did you say, Dad? Didn't you say she's not your child?" I admit that I was excited, so that my questioning voice was sharp and harsh. As my words fell, a faint cry came, but it quickly turned into a suppressed sob. It was Raina. She was scared to cry by me. The look of wanting to cry but not daring to cry was really pitiful, but it just made me feel annoyed. Maybe this is just a matter of first impression. Raina and I were doomed to be at odds. Ryan frowned and gave me a look. He was blaming me. My heart was stabbed. Before I could say anything, he had already squatted down and patiently and gently comforted Raina's emotions. Suddenly, strong emotions surged in my heart. Without thinking much, I turned around and walked out. I had never been a person who would wrong myself. Moreover, I was pregnant, and my emotions were already unstable. Seeing that I was about to leave, Ryan suddenly grabbed me. "Yo-yo, things are not what you think. Give me some time, and I'll explain it clearly to you." I looked deeply at Ryan. His expression was serious. He wasn't lying. After restraining myself again and again, I broke free from him and went upstairs. "I'll wait for you in the bedroom." 02 Ryan and I had known each other since we were 6 years old. At that time, he was a cute little doll, while I was a wild monkey running around. Seeing that I was about to leave, Ryan suddenly grabbed me. "Yo-yo, things are not what you think. Give me some time, and I'll explain it clearly to you." I thought I would always be a tomboy, but when I went to the amusement park with Ryan for the first time, a magical scene happened. My mother said that I held Ryan's hand and sat on the slide. Not only did I look terrified, but I also said in a rather affected way, "Brother, I'm scared." I don't remember this incident, but I believe I could have done it. After all, I had been a fan of Ryan's good looks since I was a child. There was no way around it. He was so good looking, just like a child star on TV. I became Ryan's best friend by pestering him constantly. We went to school and came back home together, ate together, and did homework together. Sometimes when our parents were not at home, we would hide under the same quilt to boost each other's courage. At that time, we were young and didn't know what forever meant, but we promised to be together for a lifetime. However, all of this came to an abrupt end when we entered high school. He moved to another city with his parents, and I was left behind without even a goodbye. From this, we can see that childhood promises don't count. While I was lost in thought, Ryan pushed the door open and walked in. I raised my wrist to check the time. It had been 20 minutes. "Tell me." Ryan handed a piece of paper to me and said, "This is a paternity test. Raina and I have no blood relationship." I took the appraisal report expressionlessly. The final conclusion proved what Ryan said. However, this report didn't calm my mood at all. I put the paper aside and said, "Ryan, just tell me directly. Don't wait for me to ask one question and you answer one." I didn't like this way of squeezing out information bit by bit. More importantly, I didn't know where to start asking. Ryan seemed to not know where to start either. After hesitating for a while, he said, "Raina is Ariella's daughter, 03. Ariella. I knew her. And we had met once." Although we had only met once, I remembered it vividly, because when I saw her, she was standing on tiptoe and gently kissing Ryan. 04. Ryan and I separated when we entered high school. When we met again, it was already in senior 3. At that time, he came to our class as a transfer student. When I saw him at first sight, I was stunned. He had changed a lot compared to when he was a child. Although his facial features still looked the same as before, he was more heroic and handsome. The most important thing was his aura, which was cold and distant, as if keeping people thousands of miles away. For a moment, I didn't dare to confirm whether this Ryan was the Ryan I knew. What made me even more unsure was whether he still remembered me after 2 years of separation. But he said to me, "Yo-yo, I'm back." He was still my Ryan. Later, we got together at the critical moment of high school. In senior 3, time was tight and tasks were heavy. We studied against the clock while squeezing in time to fall in love. We enjoyed the sourness and sweetness of first love, so much so that we ignored many existing problems. For example, we reluctantly accommodated each other against our will, and we hid the contradictions that could have been resolved. And all of this exploded after we entered university. We quarreled, had a Cold War, and consumed each other's energy. Finally, we broke up. At that time, we had just entered university for 3 months. I originally thought that we would have a happy future of sharing weal and woe, but unexpectedly, in the end, we went our separate ways. During that period of time, I was in great pain. After struggling for 4 months, I finally couldn't help but go to find him. But downstairs in his dormitory, I saw a girl kissing him. That girl was Ariella. 05 Ryan said that Ariella suddenly contacted him a month ago and said that she wanted to see him, but Ryan refused. A week ago, she called again and said that she had cancer, in the terminal stage, and was about to die soon. She wanted to see Ryan for the last time. This time, Ryan agreed. Ryan's words stunned me. Ryan's face was a bit gloomy and he said, she passed away. It was breast cancer. When it was discovered, it was already in the terminal stage. Even chemotherapy and surgery couldn't extend her life. I was stunned on the spot. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. People leave this world every moment, and the passing of life is a common occurrence. However, when the person who passed away was someone you once knew, the feeling was different. There was a sense of sighing, regret, and exclamation. And I had mixed feelings. One was for Ariella's departure. The second was for the child she left behind. Looking at Ryan, I said, I'm sorry, but I still want to ask you, why? Why did she want to see you for the last time? Why did she leave her child to you? Why does this child have nothing to do with you? If I remember correctly, you told me back then that you two weren't together, and she went abroad after we got back together. 06. Ryan saw me and pushed Ariella away to catch up with me. He said, Yo-Yo, I can explain. But I said angrily, there's nothing to explain. We've already broken up. You have the right to start a new relationship. Ryan looked at me in disbelief and said, is that what you think? No, that's not what I thought. I was dying of jealousy and sadness. But my useless pride still made me nod. I said, yes, that's what I think. Ryan let go of my hand and said, as you can see, she's my girlfriend. Both of us knew that we were just saying angry words. But we were really hurt by each other. We were both too stubborn to be the first to back down. It wasn't until I was hospitalized later due to appendicitis that the ice between us finally broke. He finally explained to me the existence of Ariella. Ariella was an admirer of Ryan. Unlike others, she was very high profile and even boasted that there was no relationship she couldn't break up. That day, Ariella took the opportunity of club affairs to go to Ryan. When Ryan wasn't paying attention, she suddenly kissed him. Ryan was about to push her away immediately, but it was just so coincidental that I showed up right when Ryan was about to push her away. Ryan made his attitude clear and had no more contact with Ariella. But now it seemed that things were obviously not like that. Did Ryan lie to me? This thought only lingered in my mind for a second, but it already made me extremely painful. 07 Ryan was silent. Sometimes silence hurts more than the truth. My hands hanging by my sides clenched tightly. Ryan, you should have thought that some things couldn't be avoided when you brought this child back. Ryan closed his eyes and reopened them a few seconds later. Ryan asked me, do you remember the angry words I said to you? I remembered. He said, I know those were angry words. Even you know that they were just angry words. But Ariella took them seriously. Ryan once said to me, as you can see, she's my girlfriend. Ariella took it seriously. She began to claim that she was Ryan's girlfriend. She publicized everywhere that she was with Ryan. She tried to please and make friends with Ryan's classmates and friends. By the time Ryan noticed, everyone thought that they were really in a relationship. Ariella stood in front of Ryan with a bouquet of flowers and said that today was the 1-month anniversary of her relationship with her boyfriend and that this was a surprise for her boyfriend. Everyone looked at this scene excitedly and yelled, "Kiss! Kiss!" Ryan was so angry and embarrassed by Ariella's act that he publicly exposed Ariella and said that he had never been with her and that the so-called relationship was just her imagination. Ryan said, "I didn't think much about it at that time. I just wanted to end that farce," but Ariella suffered from public opinion violence because of that incident. Everyone's ridicule and sarcasm were too much for her to bear, and finally she was forced to transfer to another school and went abroad as an exchange student. However, going abroad didn't save Ariella. Instead, it pushed her into an abyss. In a strange environment away from her hometown, she soon suffered from bipolar disorder. Later, she was violated after getting drunk and got pregnant with a stranger's child. By the time she found out that she was pregnant, the child in her belly had already taken shape. And because of her physical condition, this might be her only child. So she decided to give birth to it. To support the child, she suspended her studies and went to work. Under heavy pressure and with pent-up emotions in her heart, her health broke down. Ryan said, "She suffered all these because of me. Raising Reina to grow up was her last wish. Yo-yo, I have to do it." I was silent. Originally, I thought this was an emotional issue, but now it has become a matter of values. After a long time, I finally found my voice again. I said, "Ariella has parents. We can give the child to them, and we'll pay the child support." Ryan said, "When Ariella decided to give birth to the child, she broke up with her parents. They don't like this child. But this is their daughter's child. Blood is thicker than water. It can't be cut off." Ryan was silent. His silence told me that he didn't agree with this proposal. I dug my nails into my palms. I said, "Or we can find a good adoptive family for her. Similarly, we'll pay the child support." Ryan looked at me with impatience showing between his eyebrows. He said, "How can you be sure that the adoptive family will really be good to her? She's just an 8-year-old child. We are fully capable of adopting her." "Why don't you agree?" "Because I'm pregnant." I suddenly stood up trembling and shouting at him. But Ryan's first reaction was to look outside the door and then he said to me, "Yo-yo, keep your voice down." Ryan's reaction made me so angry that I couldn't help laughing. I picked up the pillow on the sofa and threw it at him. "Ryan, you're really something." After saying that, I got up and walked out. "Yo-yo." Ryan wanted to stop me again, and I shouted directly, "Don't touch me." His hand froze. I opened the door and bumped into the small figure standing outside. She was knocked down to the ground by me. I quickly reached out to help her, but she seemed to regard me as a monster. While propping herself up on the ground and backing away continuously, she burst into loud sobs. Ryan brushed past my arm and ran out of the room. He squatted down and helped Reina up, asking anxiously, "Are you hurt, 08? I wonder if he's out of his mind." He didn't react at all when I told him I was pregnant, but when that child fell down, he was worried to death. With his reaction like this, do you believe him when he says the child isn't his? I really don't know what he's thinking. Even if he's kind-hearted and wants to help others, he doesn't have to raise the child himself. We have thousands of ways, but he has to choose the most unacceptable one. What on earth does he want to do? Does he not want to live with me anymore? If he doesn't, then we can break up. Divorce. I didn't dare to tell my parents, so I could only go to my best friend's house. When I got here, I finally couldn't control my emotions and shouted angrily. My best friend comforted me and said, "Calm down. Don't be so angry. Don't you think your reaction is a bit too extreme?" Hearing this, my hand holding the water glass paused. I thought about Ryan's reaction when I proposed something, his indifference when he heard that I was pregnant, and his not even looking up when I left in the end. Because of Reina's appearance, Ryan's attitude towards me had changed 180 degrees, which had never happened before. I always felt that he was still hiding something from me. I said to my best friend, "You don't understand." My best friend sighed and said, "Haven't you ever thought about accepting this child?" After all, you can afford it. I shook my head resolutely and said, that child hates me. I don't need to bring myself such trouble. I recalled the look in the child's eyes when she first looked at me, full of hatred and hostility. It was a look that made it impossible for people to like her. I didn't know why the child had such strong emotions towards me, but I knew that I couldn't accept it. With so many thoughts in my mind, I didn't sleep well that night. The next day, Ryan came to find me. I took out my mobile phone and checked the time. I'm going to be late. Ryan said, I'll give you a ride. I didn't refuse. After getting in the car and just driving out of the community, Ryan couldn't help but speak. He said, Reina is introverted, timid, and weak. Ariella entrusted her to me when she was on her deathbed. I can't just ignore her. The influence of a child's original family on them is lifelong. Yo-yo, don't rush to make a conclusion. Get along with her first, okay? I let out a long sigh. Ryan, have you already forgotten what I told you yesterday? Ryan was stunned and looked bewildered. I was hurt by his reaction. Stop the car. Yo-yo, I said, stop the car. Seeing that I was determined, Ryan pulled over and stopped the car. I opened the door, got out of the car, and slammed the door heavily. I walked forward quickly for a few steps, then suddenly stopped and then turned around and walked back. Through the car window, I said to Ryan, I'm pregnant. I told you yesterday. But from yesterday to today, you haven't even said a word of concern. How's the child? How old is she? What should I pay attention to? Don't you care at all? Ryan, you really disappoint me. Now I'll make it clear. If you want to adopt this child, that's fine. Then we'll get divorced. Point 09. When I mentioned the word divorce to Ryan, his face immediately turned cold. He said, Yo-yo, can't you ever get rid of the problem of speaking without thinking after all these years? I sneered and said, do you think I'm just being angry with you? We parted on bad terms. We didn't contact each other for 3 consecutive days. Until the 4th day, Ryan was waiting for me downstairs at my company. When he saw me coming out, he said, let's go home. Over the years, from falling in love to getting married, we knew each other's ways all too well. Ryan was giving me a way out. In the past, I would definitely have taken it, but this time, whoever wanted to could take it. I just pretended not to see it and turned in another direction to leave. Ryan quickly caught up with me and said, Yo-yo, what on earth do you want? Looking at his repressed eyes, I asked, where's the child? Has she been sent away? He was silent. Then we have nothing to talk about. Let's get divorced. Yo-yo. Ryan growled in a low voice. I coldly stared back at him. She's just a child. Why can't you tolerate her? I didn't originally want to say more, but in the end, I couldn't hold back. I should be the one asking you this. Why do you have to adopt her? Ryan was silent again. I disappointedly walked past him. In a place where he couldn't see, I placed my hand on my belly. Once again, he didn't say a word about the life we had created together. Disappointed and sad, I was in a really bad mood. I found a lawyer and asked him to help me draft a divorce agreement. My best friend advised me not to be impulsive. She thought that my emotions were affected because I was pregnant. Impulsive? Maybe a little. But more of it was after careful consideration. Ryan's attitude bothered me. If he could have talked to me about this matter rationally, maybe I would have impulsively agreed to be the adoptive mother. However, he was so emotional that he completely stood on Reina's side, and even the fact that I was carrying his child in my belly couldn't sway him. Such an attitude was really disheartening. I had to consider the worst-case scenario. When my child was born, if he had to choose between Reina and my child, who would Ryan choose? Why should my child, who should have had a complete father's love, be the one to be chosen? Just when I was about to give the divorce agreement to Ryan, he called me. His voice sounded tired and hoarse. He said, I've sent the child to Ariella's parents. I was so surprised. I didn't expect that Ryan, who had been so determined before, would compromise, and so quickly at that. I followed him home, and he hugged me and said, Yo-yo, I was wrong before. Because of Ariella's death, my emotions were affected and I ignored you and the child. I'm sorry. I seriously thought about what you said. I was being too stubborn. I'm sorry. His apology made me feel full of grievances. I couldn't help pursing my lips and crying out, "You didn't care about me or the child. How could you do this?" Seeing that I was crying, Ryan comforted me at a loss. I'm sorry, Yo-Yo. It's all my fault. It won't happen again." The emotions that had been pent up for many days were finally released at this moment. When I finally calmed down, Ryan wiped my tears and said to me seriously, "If you're angry, you can hit me or scold me, but just don't mention divorce. If there's a next time." I glared at him and said, "What if there's a next time? What do you want to do?" Ryan glared back and said, "Do you still want there to be a next time?" I felt aggrieved and said, "Is it my fault?" Ryan sighed and said, "It's my fault." He hugged me again and gently placed his hand on my lower abdomen. He said, "How's the baby? Let's go to the hospital for an examination tomorrow, okay?" That night, we hugged each other tightly and it was full of warmth, as if all the estrangement and contradictions had disappeared at this moment, but I knew that they hadn't. I saw a fairy tale book on our bedside table, there were several pairs of fluffy rabbit shoes in the shoe cabinet, there was a cute glass on the table. Candies and biscuits could be seen everywhere on the coffee table, there was a piece of leftover strawberry cake in the refrigerator. There was also a Barbie doll hidden behind the pillow on the sofa. In just a few days, it seemed that Raina's presence was everywhere. Looking at these things, I could imagine that when I was feeling extremely sad, Ryan was at home coaxing someone else's daughter. However, I didn't react at all. I'm not the kind of person who makes trouble unreasonably. Ryan had already made a concession on this matter, so why should I be aggressive? I thought that these things would gradually disappear. But accidents always come so unexpectedly. 10 Raina broke her arm and was hospitalized. Today was the 7th day after Ryan sent Raina away. He came to pick me up from work as usual. On the way, he asked me what I wanted to eat, but before I could answer, his cell phone rang. Seeing the incoming call reminder, he frowned tightly and quickly answered the call. "What's wrong?" he asked. I don't know what the person on the other end said, but Ryan slammed on the brakes. "How did you take care of the child?" "Never mind. I'll be there right away." Ryan looked at me and said, "Yo-Yo, I have to go to the hospital. Shall I take you home first?" He said that the person who called was Ariella's mother. She said that Raina had broken her arm but refused to let the doctor treat her. She had no choice but to call Ryan. Women are so strange. When he considered me first at that moment, I didn't mind so much. I said, "I'll go with you." Ryan looked at me in surprise and then he grasped my hand tightly and said, "Yo-Yo, you're so nice." Ryan and I rushed to the hospital as quickly as possible. As soon as we got closer, we heard a sharp scream. Ryan paused for a moment and then quickly ran forward. There were many people standing in the ward, including doctors, nurses, and an old couple. Opposite them was Raina, who was extremely tense. Her small body was pressed against the wall and she seemed to be in a state of preparing for battle. Whenever someone tried to approach her, she would scream at the top of her voice, until Ryan pushed through the crowd and gently called, "Raina." Raina suddenly looked at Ryan. Her lips moved and then she closed her eyes and fainted. She was calling Dad. Ryan quickly caught her, and the doctors and nurses also rushed forward immediately. The doctor said that Raina had been suffering from long-term lack of sleep and had fainted. As for her hand, it was fractured and with her constant struggling, it had become dislocated and needed an operation. Soon she was pushed into the operating room. Ryan asked Ariella's parents with a gloomy face, "How did Raina get hurt?" Ariella's mother avoided his gaze and said, "This child didn't listen. She climbed onto the table by herself and fell down." "What about the lack of sleep?" "How should I know? She doesn't sleep at night by herself. What can I do?" Then she glared at Ryan and said, "Didn't you say she's not your child? Since you don't want to raise her, why do you care so much? Okay, you can leave now." Ariella's father finally spoke up, all right, stop talking. If he leaves, what if Raina makes a fuss again? Can you calm her down?" Ariella's mother rolled her eyes and said, "An ungrateful wretch. Not only Ryan but also I was angry when hearing this. Ryan coldly withdrew his gaze and didn't want to say more to them. He asked me if I wanted him to take me back first. I refused and waited with him. 2.5 hours later, Raina was pushed out, her eyes were closed and she was still in a coma. Seeing that Ryan and I were waiting here, Ariella's parents left directly, saying that they were going home for dinner. I couldn't help asking her, "Aren't you worried about the child at all?" She said matter-of-factly, "Aren't you here? If you want to leave, hire a nurse for her." After saying that, she left without looking back. I thought that this was already the worst, but when Raina woke up, I realized that things were even worse than I had imagined. Raina said that the reason she climbed onto the table was that she was hungry. There was no food at home, only a box of biscuits on the cabinet. As for the lack of sleep, she said that she was alone at home every night and she was scared. Ariella's parents didn't have stable jobs, they lived on the demolition compensation and rent. Every night they would go out to play cards, they might come back at 11 or 12 o'clock if it was early, or stay out all night if it was late. Raina grasped Ryan's hand and pleaded in a low voice, "Dad, can I live with you?" Ryan's hand froze. He turned to look at me with a pleading look in his eyes. Raina seemed to realize something. She lowered her head and let go of Ryan's hand. My heart softened. I even began to question my previous decision. If it weren't for me, this child wouldn't have suffered so much. I said, "Okay." Ryan looked at me in disbelief and said, "Yo-yo, thank you." Ryan gently said to Raina, "Raina, you can live with Dad from now on. Aren't you happy?" A big smile appeared on Raina's pale face. She nodded heavily and then said, "Yes," loudly. "Raina, thank Mom." Hearing this sentence, both Raina and I were silent. Seeing Raina's obviously reluctant look, I quickly said, "No need. Just call me Auntie." Raina looked at me and smiled shyly, "Thank you, Auntie." Ryan was very efficient. He not only persuaded Ariella's parents but also directly registered Raina's household. During this period, I had been staying in the hospital with Raina. Raina was very well behaved, and all the doctors and nurses liked her. She was very nice to me and even tried to please me. The look of hatred that she had before never appeared again. This actually made me feel quite mixed emotions. I thought maybe I had been too prejudiced against this child. Raina recovered quickly after staying in the hospital for a month and a half. During this process, Ryan and the nurse took care of her more. I would go to see her occasionally, and every time she would give me a big apple. Later, Ryan said that this apple was specially reserved for me by her, the biggest and reddest one. I admit that I was touched. Ryan put his arm around me and said, "When the baby is born, there will be an older sister." How nice. 11 As time went by, my pregnancy reached the 3rd month. Before Raina was discharged from the hospital, Ryan accompanied me to have the first prenatal checkup at the 3rd month. We had a B ultrasound, a blood test, and other routine examinations. Everything was normal. Everything was developing in a good direction. I said to Ryan, "Don't tell Raina about my pregnancy for now. Let's wait until she gets used to living here for a while." Just as Ryan once said, Raina was really insecure. It could be seen from the way she tried to please me. If we told her that I was pregnant at this time, she would probably feel quite bad. Ryan had also thought of this, but he just didn't know how to tell me. Now that I brought it up, he was obviously relieved. He said, "Yo-yo, thank you. Don't be so polite. Since I've decided to adopt her, I'll be nice to her. Don't worry. I really wanted to be kind to Raina. I decorated a pink room for her, bought clothes for all seasons, and all the daily necessities were purchased according to the preferences of a little girl. As for her schooling, I entrusted it to my mother. They only learned about Raina at this time. Mom didn't quite agree, but Dad stopped her. Dad said, "Raising a child isn't as easy as you think. Moreover, there's such a connection between her and Ryan. Especially now that you're pregnant. If you've made a decision, you should take on the responsibility." I asked myself that I had made a decision and could take on the responsibility, but soon I found something was wrong. Because Raina's hand hadn't fully recovered yet, and both Ryan and I had to work, we specially hired a nanny to take care of her. At first, everything was fine. peaceful and harmonious. I had the habit of drinking milk an hour before going to bed every day, and I had kept this habit for many years. It was half a month after Raina moved into our home that I went to the kitchen to make milk as usual. However, as soon as I stepped in, I suddenly slipped and my whole body fell backwards out of control. I quickly grabbed the door frame and only then did I stabilize myself and didn't fall down. Even so, I was still terribly frightened. I called Ryan loudly. He was also scared. He directly picked me up horizontally and put me on the sofa. When he went to the kitchen to check, he found a layer of oil on the floor, which was the culprit that made me fall. Both of our faces looked very gloomy. Ryan immediately called the nanny and questioned her about how she did her job. But the nanny repeatedly explained that she had definitely cleaned it up and said that she wouldn't make such a stupid mistake. But where did this oil come from? Nobody knew. We could only assume that the nanny was careless. It was just an accident. An accident that was soon forgotten by us. A week later, Ryan and I went to a neighboring city to attend a friend's wedding banquet. We went there on the same day and didn't come back until the next day. When we got home, Raina was very happy and rushed over, wanting to hug us. She rushed straight at me like a little firecracker. Her posture was as if she was going to hit something with her head. I was so scared that I quickly protected my belly. Fortunately, Ryan stopped her in time. Even so, her body still lunged forward, which showed how strong she was. Ryan's face also became a bit stiff. He said, "Raina, you should be more careful in the future. You can't bump into Auntie like this." Raina said, "Oh," and looked at me blankly, then nodded and said obediently, "I know." For a moment, I suspected whether Raina knew that I was pregnant and whether she deliberately wanted to bump into me. But this speculation was a bit malicious, and I quickly suppressed it. This incident passed without any danger and quietly disappeared, and what really bothered me was that night. It was a stormy night, and Raina knocked on our bedroom door. She said that she was scared and wanted to sleep with us. Ryan asked for my opinion, and I agreed. Raina happily lay down between us. After chatting for a while, we were all sleepy. Suddenly, there was a loud thunderclap. Raina screamed and kicked my belly at the same time. A sharp pain came, and I couldn't help shouting, "Ryan!" 12. Raina's kick sent me straight to the hospital. Although there was no bleeding, the abdominal pain didn't stop. After a series of examinations, the doctor said that there were symptoms of threatened miscarriage and suggested that I be hospitalized for tocolytic treatment. So I stayed in the hospital. The doctor said very seriously, "Pregnancy isn't as fragile as we think. Small bumps and collisions won't have a big impact. But the kick you received was very forceful. If someone did it on purpose, you can choose to call the police." Then she gave Ryan a meaningful look. Ryan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "It was the child at home who got startled while sleeping and accidentally kicked her." The doctor suddenly realized and reminded, "If that's the case, you should be careful to avoid the child in the future. However, this child has really strong legs." The doctor didn't mean anything by saying that, but I took it to heart. Ryan took out his mobile phone from time to time, as if he was replying to messages. I asked him what was going on. He said that Raina's condition wasn't very good, because I had continuous abdominal pain. Both Ryan and I were frightened. At that time, Raina was also very emotional and kept crying while hugging Ryan. Ryan had no choice but to temporarily entrust her to our neighbors, a couple. Then he quickly took me to the hospital. They said that Raina kept crying and didn't let them approach her. Her mental state seemed a bit off. "So what?" I asked him back in a cold tone. Ryan was stunned and said, "What?" He frowned and looked at me and said, "Yo-yo, what's wrong with you?" I asked Ryan, "Did you tell Raina about my pregnancy?" The implication in my words was too obvious. Ryan immediately bristled like a hedgehog. "Yo-yo, what do you mean? Do you suspect that Raina did it on purpose? She's only 8 years old. How can you think of her like that?" The aggression in his words was too strong, but I still held back my anger and analyzed it with him. The doctor said that the kick was very forceful. She even suspected that it was done on purpose. So, before I could finish my words, Ryan interrupted me. "Raina was frightened by the thunder. How could she do it on purpose? Didn't you see how hard she was crying?" I said. she said she was afraid of thunder, but before she came to our room, she didn't scream at all. Instead, she had such a big reaction under the protection of two adults like us. Do you think it's normal? I continued. She was lying flat. If she was frightened, she should have kicked out with both feet. Did she kick you? Ryan blurted out. She did. You're lying. I was really angry inside. I tried to explain to him calmly so that he could face this matter rationally, but obviously, he didn't. All of a sudden, my heart sank. I looked at Ryan disappointedly, and he avoided my gaze. Just then, Ryan's cell phone rang. Raina's crying came from the phone. From the occasional words that leaked out, I could infer that Raina was admitting her mistake. And the purpose of admitting her mistake was to beg Ryan not to abandon her. Ryan comforted her gently. After the repeated comforts didn't work, his expression clearly became anxious. Raina, don't be afraid. Dad will be back soon. After hanging up the phone, Ryan looked at me hesitantly. He said, Yo-Yo, can I hire a nurse for you? I really didn't expect Ryan to say such a thing. Our child almost had a miscarriage. I had to lie in bed to protect the fetus, but he wanted to leave. I clenched my fists tightly and said, Go ahead. This was an angry remark. I hoped that he could hear the anger in my tone, then feel distressed, compromise and stay, and apologize to me for his behavior. But he really left. Hearing the sound of the door closing, I couldn't help crying. Mother often said that I was too stubborn. She said that every time I quarreled with Ryan, I would oppose him directly, but then I would hide and cry by myself afterwards, which was useless. She said that children who cry would get comfort, and only by crying would he feel distressed. But she didn't understand that I never cried to make him feel distressed. I was just sad. Ryan and I had been together for so many years. I had invested a huge amount of emotional cost in him, so I hoped to get equal emotional returns. Rather than getting pity through calculation and tricks. That would be demeaning to me and also to our relationship. I shook my head, pulled myself out of my thoughts, and then began to think about Raina's matter. One thing might be a coincidence when it happened for the first time, but if it happened again and again, it must be on purpose. 3 times in 20 days. Accidents were no longer enough to convince me. Especially the first time. I carefully recalled that after the nanny finished cleaning and left, I had entered the kitchen and there was no oil at that time. But when I went there the second time, it was there. Obviously, it had nothing to do with the nanny. So, who else could it be? At first, I regretted not adopting Raina because of my prejudice against her. Now, I regretted adopting Raina. I had always scoffed at regret. Since things had already happened, it was better to bear the consequences and solve them. Regret was the most useless thing. However, Raina has shattered my values that I've held for many years. Now I don't know what to do either. But anyway, first of all, I need to have a good talk with Ryan. At least we have to reach a consensus on the matter of Raina. But to my surprise, Ryan has never shown up since he left that night. There wasn't a single phone call or any explanation from him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. At first, I was very angry. I stubbornly confronted him on my own. Since he didn't contact me, I wouldn't contact him either. But on the third day, I began to worry. I was worried that something had happened to him or that he had met with an accident. Finally, I couldn't help it and dialed his number. No one answered the first call. My heart skipped a beat. Then I dialed the second call immediately. Just when I thought the second call wouldn't be answered either, Ryan's tired and hoarse voice came through. Yo-Yo? Where are you? I asked. Ryan said, in the hospital. He said that Raina had some mental problems and they were in the psychiatric department now. Before Ryan could make himself clear, Raina's terrified scream came from the other side. The next second, the phone was hung up directly. I sat on the bed blankly, with mixed feelings in my heart. Ryan was in the hospital, the same hospital as mine. Only we were in different inpatient buildings. Even so, it was just a 5-minute walk. But he hadn't come to see me even once. My heart felt icy cold. At this moment, there was only one thought screaming in my heart, divorce. 13. I had basically recovered and could get out of bed and walk around. I put on my coat and went straight to the psychiatric department. It didn't take me long to find Raina's ward. Looking through the glass window, Raina was lying on the bed with her eyes closed, looking as if she was on the verge of death and in a broken state. Ryan was sitting beside the bed. He was holding Raina's hand with one hand and rubbing his temples with the other. He looked haggard, with messy hair, as if he hadn't had enough sleep. The nurse said that Raina's condition was very bad. She was obviously severely frightened. Not only did she suffer from insomnia and fear, but she would also scream and hurt people and even showed signs of autism. Except for Ryan, no one could get close to her. Anyone who tried to approach her would be scratched or even bitten by her, and she was very sensitive, so Ryan had to stay by her side all the time. Once he tried to leave, she would wake up and make a big fuss. So neither Raina nor Ryan had had a full night's sleep these days. I asked the nurse, is it possible that she's faking it? The nurse looked at me in surprise, and hesitation appeared in her eyes. Are you really the child's mother? I nodded expressionlessly. The nurse's originally kind attitude changed subtly. She said, she's such a young child. How could that be possible? And if you don't sleep, you can't stand it either. When a child has problems, parents should still try to understand. After saying that, she left without looking back. I thought that in her heart, I must be an extremely evil mother. Without seeing Ryan, I left directly. Then I went through the discharge procedures and left the hospital alone. Right after being discharged, instead of going home, I went to Ariella's parents' place. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I knocked a few more times, and the door opposite opened. A middle-aged woman came out and said, "Stop knocking. If you're looking for Ariella's family, go to the mahjong parlor downstairs." I thanked her and followed her instructions to find the mahjong parlor. Both of Ariella's parents were at the mahjong table. When she saw me, Ariella's mother was stunned for a moment and then said casually, "What? Can't take care of her properly and want to send her back to us? I'm telling you, I won't take her." I said, "I want to talk to you." She said, "I don't have time." "Then I'll wait for you." With that, I sat down beside her. The people at the card table all looked at me curiously and gossiped with her about who I was. Ariella's mother snapped back at them impatiently and then shouted at me to leave. And her father didn't say a word from beginning to end, as if it had nothing to do with him. Finally, her mother couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed the cards away and walked out. I followed her out. "What on earth do you want from me?" I asked her. "How did Raina break her arm exactly?" She said, "Didn't we already tell you? She climbed onto the table by herself. She's not a naughty child." "Why did she climb onto the table?" The woman glared at me and said, "What do you mean? Do you suspect that we abused her? Don't you try to blackmail us for money." "I'm telling you, no way." I didn't pay attention to her words and continued, "Raina said that she was always hungry when she was at your place." Hearing this, the woman jumped to her feet and said, "I always said that she's an ungrateful wretch, just like her mother." After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. I quickly stopped her and said, "I know it's not your problem. I've also noticed some things about Raina recently. We all want to help her. She's still young, and there's still time for her to change. But first of all, we need to know where the problem lies." From the woman's trembling tone and red eyes, it could be seen that she wasn't completely without feelings for Ariella and Raina. My words made her hesitate, and finally, she told me everything. She said that Raina refused to eat any food they cooked, whether it was meat or vegetables, whether it was light or spicy. She refused them all, and after refusing to eat, she would secretly take biscuits to fill her stomach. At first, they turned a blind eye to it, but after it happened too many times, they couldn't stand it anymore. They wanted to correct her bad habit, so they forced her to eat and put all the snacks in the house out of her reach, but she still wouldn't eat and climbed onto the table to get the biscuits. When they found out, they told her to get down, and she jumped down directly. This was the truth about how she broke her arm. As for sleep, the old couple did have the habit of playing mahjong, but since Raina came, they had never gone out together again. One of them would always stay at home to look after the child. They really didn't know that Raina didn't sleep because Raina refused to share a room with them and insisted on sleeping alone. Finally, she said, we didn't educate her mother well. She had bad intentions since she was a child. Later she stole our money and went abroad. She didn't even make a phone call for so many years. Now that she's dead, she left this little one behind, exactly the same as her mother. We can't educate her well. You, figure it out yourselves. Looking at her back, I found that she was even thinner than before, and her whole back was hunched. Sometimes, what we see may not be the truth. I turned off the recording button on my phone and saved the audio carefully, then I went home and waited quietly for them to come back. On the third day, Ryan brought Raina home. 2 days ago, Ryan called me. He explained that he also wanted to visit me, but Raina couldn't be left alone. Almost as soon as he walked to the elevator entrance, she would wake up and then cry. After hearing these words, I just replied with a faint, Ryan noticed the abnormality in my tone and was silent for a while, then he said, Yo-Yo, I know you're angry. When Raina is discharged from the hospital, you can do whatever you want to vent your anger. These days at home, take good care of yourself. I just replied with an again and then hung up the phone. We're all adults. We've long passed the age of believing in love just from sweet words. I won't be moved just because he says some nice words. What I need is real company and care, and obviously he can't give me that now. Raina had become even thinner and smaller, as if she had shrunk. Even her once fair cheeks were now sallow. Ryan didn't look any better. He looked so dispirited. Those who didn't know would think that they had just escaped from a famine-stricken place. Ryan said to me, Yo-Yo, it was Raina's fault this time. She's also learned her lesson. I'll apologize to you on her behalf. Please forgive her this time. I ignored Ryan's words and looked at Raina instead. She also looked at me. There was some numbness and dullness in her eyes. But soon she hid behind Ryan shyly. I said, do you want to apologize to me? Then you should speak for yourself. A cry came from Raina's mouth and then she grasped the corner of Ryan's clothes tightly, trembling all over. Ryan stepped forward and blocked in front of Raina. Yo-Yo, that's enough. There was a warning in his voice and vigilance in his eyes. I looked at Ryan and said calmly, at home, you can let her bear the consequences of her mistakes. When she grows up, will you have to say sorry for her for everything? Ryan, you've gone too far. I went back to the room alone. Ryan didn't come in until 10 o'clock. I closed the book in my hand and said, let's talk. Ryan lay on the bed wearily and sighed. Can we do it tomorrow? I'm too tired. Ryan, I don't always have the patience to wait for you. My words made Ryan open his eyes. He forced himself to sit up. He was indeed very tired. This wasn't the right time to talk, but I didn't care. I played the words that Ariella's mother said for him to listen to. Ryan listened in silence. Finally, he asked me, what do you want to say? I was stunned for a moment. So it turns out that disappointment in a person can accumulate to such an extent. So you don't think Raina has any problems at all? Ryan looked at me and said, how can you be sure that what they said is definitely true? Even if what they said is true, it can only prove that they didn't care enough about Raina. It's not enough just to do something in action. Children can tell best whether others really like them or not. So you don't think Raina has any problems at all? I asked again, emphasizing my tone. Ryan was silent. His silence told me that he didn't think there were any problems. How sad. Ryan, you're harming her. Yo-Yo, you're prejudiced against her. We parted on bad terms. I got up directly and went to the guest room. Ryan didn't stop me. When I passed by Raina's room, I saw her door ajar and the darkness inside. Ryan slept until the next afternoon. Raina was woken up by the nanny at noon to have lunch. She was still as obedient and sensible as before, eating quietly and not dropping a single grain of rice on the table. However, she no longer tried to please me. She even ignored me as if I didn't exist. We were like two invisible people in each other's eyes. This day passed quietly and oppressively. In the evening, Ryan took Raina out for a walk. He asked me to go with them, but I refused. He looked at me helplessly and finally gave in. The next day, Ryan had to go to the company while I stayed at home to recuperate. At noon, the nanny went out to buy groceries, leaving only Reina and me in the whole villa. I came out of my room and was about to go downstairs. Just after going down 2 steps, Reina pushed the door open and came out. "Auntie," she called me softly. I turned around and looked at her. She walked a few steps closer and looked up at me. She said, "Auntie, I hate you. You've taken what belonged to my mom. Our family could have been together happily." The look in her eyes when she looked at me at this moment was the same as when she first looked at me, full of hatred, resentment, and hostility, without any disguise. So it turned out that I hadn't been mistaken. I stared at her blankly and asked, "Who told you this?" Reina seemed not to have heard my words. Her eyes were fixed on my belly. She said, "Auntie, you can't have a baby. Once you don't have a baby, Dad won't want you anymore." So she did know that I was pregnant. I was about to ask her more when suddenly she reached out and pushed me hard downwards, but I didn't budge. Instead, I stood firmly where I was. I looked at her expressionlessly and said, "Reina, you're too impatient. You should wait until you've fully recovered." Reina looked at her own hand, with a look of regret in her eyes. She looked at me and said seriously, "I really hate you." After saying that, without giving me any chance to react, she just rolled straight down the stairs. I reached out to grab her, but only brushed past the corner of her clothes. Ah! It was the nanny. She was back. 14 The nanny made 3 phone calls. One was to Ryan, one was to the emergency center, and one was to the police. She was a really nice person. She believed that I was the one who had hurt Reina. She looked at me warily and protected the injured and bleeding Reina behind her. Through the nanny, I saw a pale smile on the corner of Reina's mouth. I was completely uninterested in this little drama. Since she wasn't in life-threatening danger, I had no intention of staying. I turned around and went back to my room, sighing at the same time. Reina, after all, was just an 8-year-old child. She didn't know that there was something called surveillance in the adult world, and I had never been the kind of person who would just sit around waiting for bad things to happen. To prove something, before they came home, I installed surveillance cameras everywhere in and outside the villa, in every corner. I didn't expect it would come in handy so soon. Ryan was the first one to arrive. He picked up Reina and was about to run outside. But when he heard that the nanny had called the police, he said with a gloomy face, "Who told you to call the police?" He picked up his phone and was about to make a call. But I interrupted him. I said, "I didn't push her. Do you believe me?" Ryan looked at me disappointedly and said, "Yo-Yo, you've gone too far this time. There's nothing more to say. Just leave." He said, "Come to the hospital with me." It seemed that the person who put up this banner was Serena's fiancé. I silently praised this fiancé in my heart. What a talent! Ryan looked at me with a heavy gaze and finally left without looking back. I didn't turn around, not even once, with my back to him. It took me 2 years to build this family. But it took me less than 2 hours to empty it. Before leaving, I deleted the fingerprints recorded at the entrance and took off the wedding ring that I had worn for more than 700 days and nights. This time I went back to my parents' home and told them the whole story. They didn't blame me by saying something like, "If you had known this would happen, why did you do it in the first place?" They just nodded and told me to follow my heart. The only thing they objected to was the child in my belly. They thought that if I decided to get divorced, I shouldn't keep this child. But I wasn't willing to do that. This child had survived under others' repeated schemes. "How could I abandon him?" I said. "Let me think about it." I took out the divorce agreement that I had drafted before. Unexpectedly, it finally came in handy. Together with the surveillance video and the recordings, I sent them to Ryan by courier. It showed that it was signed for in the afternoon of that day. An hour later, Ryan called me. I refused to answer. Another hour later, he showed up outside my parents' home. I didn't want to see him. I called him. He answered immediately, "Yo-Yo." I said, "Sign the divorce agreement and then we'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. And we don't need to meet during this period." Ryan said eagerly, "Yo-Yo, don't. Let's have a good talk. Let's not get divorced, okay?" "No." I hung up the phone and locked myself in the room. finally, Dad knocked on my door. He said, "Let's part on good terms. Go and make it clear." Ryan and I made an appointment to meet in a coffee shop the next day. When I arrived there, the coffee in front of him was almost gone. This coffee shop was the place where we secretly dated when we were in senior 3. After all these years, it was still there, but the young man who used to sit by the window facing the sunlight had changed completely. As soon as he saw me, Ryan stood up. He looked straight at me, his eyes burning. He ordered a glass of milk for me. He said, "2 cubes of sugar, the sweetness you like." I pushed the milk back and said, "I couldn't stand sweet things since I got pregnant." Ryan's face froze and he stood there in a daze. "Ryan, since Raina appeared, you haven't cared about me at all." It sounded really sentimental when I said this. I shook my head and said, "Forget it. Let's not talk about this. Have you signed the divorce agreement?" "Yo-yo, we're not getting divorced." I said, "That's impossible." He said eagerly, "I'll send Raina away. I'll find a foster family for her." "Yo-yo, we're not getting divorced, okay?" I let out a long sigh and said, "Ryan, I thought I knew you very well, but now I don't understand what you really want. You're such a smart person. You scored 105 points more than me in the college entrance examination. I don't believe that you couldn't see things that I could figure out at a glance. But you just pretended to be blind. If you really wanted to raise this child properly, you wouldn't have done this. So what on earth do you want? To harm her?" I've thought of many possibilities and done countless analyses. The only convincing thing is that you've lost your rationality and let your emotions get the better of you. Ryan, Raina. I asked you a lot of questions back then, and you answered them one by one. The only thing you didn't tell me was about Raina. I looked straight at Ryan and said, "So, that appraisal report was fake. Raina is your daughter." Ryan's face instantly turned pale. Everything was clear without saying a word. For a moment, I didn't know whether I felt sad or relieved in my heart. "Ryan, let's get divorced." 16. Ryan refused to get divorced. He begged me with red eyes, "Yo-yo, I'm sorry. Let's not get divorced." Ryan knew me so well. Well enough to deceive me. Because he knew that I couldn't accept it. But he was greedy, trying to have his cake and eat it too. "Ryan, that's it. There's no possibility for us anymore." But Ryan didn't accept it. He showed up outside my parents' home every day. When my parents couldn't bear to see it, they would let him in, then he would sit downstairs and wait until it got dark before saying goodbye and leaving. And more often, he would just stand outside, standing there for hours, doing something in vain. I was so tired. The names Ryan and Raina tortured me day and night. Whenever I thought that Ryan had betrayed me 8 years ago, I felt extremely uncomfortable, as if my heart was being scratched and I felt sick and wanted to vomit. I wanted a divorce. As quickly as possible. I went out to see Ryan. Suddenly, his gloomy eyes lit up. He looked at me infatuatedly and said, "Yo-yo. Ryan, let's get divorced." Ryan shook his head and subconsciously took a step back. I said, "Get divorced or I'll release the video of Raina trying to push me but falling down the stairs instead." Ryan suddenly looked at me. "You wouldn't do that." I looked at him seriously and said, "I would." "What about the child?" "We still have a child. Can you bear to let him be born without a father?" Ryan seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. I smiled and said, "When Raina wanted to hurt him, you didn't think about protecting him. Now just think that this child has already been killed by Raina." Ryan's face looked terrible. His eyes were full of grief, despair, and more of disbelief. To hurt someone by hitting where it hurts most, that's exactly what it was like. Ryan agreed. He signed the divorce agreement. On the day we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau, he said to me, "I'm not afraid that you'll expose the video. I just don't want you to hate me." "Yo-yo, don't hate me." He looked at me with pleading eyes as if my answer was his salvation, but in the end, I couldn't give it to him. Because I didn't know either. Would Ryan deliberately hurt me? No. Did Ryan hurt me? Yes. Once the harm has been done, does it matter whether it was intentional or not? Maybe I don't hate him that much now. However, if we continued to be entangled with each other, it would be a disaster. On the second day after getting the divorce certificate, I went abroad with the baby in my belly. He accompanied me to travel around and we experienced different local customs and cultures. Finally, I gave birth to a chubby boy in a small town in Provence. Mom rushed over the next day. She scolded me harshly, blaming me for being so troublesome. But in the end, she still took care of me during my postpartum confinement without complaint. The little chubby boy is really troublesome. He not only has a loud voice but also loves to cry, making people feel dizzy every day. I was quite helpless, but Mom was very happy. She said that a loud voice meant vitality, good lung capacity, and good health, and that he would definitely be tall, handsome, and good-looking in the future. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could a loud voice really determine his glorious future? Don't be too excessive with the love for grandchildren. We managed to get through the postpartum confinement in a chaotic state. After I finally got the hang of taking care of the baby, Mom immediately packed her luggage and wanted to take us back to our home country together. I hesitated. Mom said earnestly, "Running away can't solve any problems. Are you planning to die in a foreign land in the end?" I really appreciate this kind of words. Sarcasm here. Just like that, I was taken back to our home country with my child without any say in the matter. Dad picked us up at the airport. I looked around warily. Only after making sure that Ryan wasn't there did I breathe a sigh of relief. I admit that I didn't want to see him and I didn't want to have any entanglement with him regarding the child. This child has survived one difficult situation after another. He's alive tenaciously. If in the end he couldn't see this beautiful world because of me, I couldn't bear it. I didn't give birth to him for anyone else, but for himself. If Ryan were rational enough, he should know that his best choice was not to show up in front of my son and me, but obviously, he didn't. He came to my home and wanted to see me. At that time, I was holding the little chubby boy and patting his back to help him burp. Ryan looked at me eagerly, his eyes fixed on the child all the time. I frowned and handed the child to my mother. "Let's go outside and talk." Ryan looked at me pleadingly and said, "Yo-yo, can I hold the child?" I looked at him expressionlessly and said, "No. If you don't want to talk, just leave." Ryan's face fell. He stared at me blankly and finally lowered his head. He gave in the living room. He and I sat face to face. Ryan opened his mouth. After a long while, he said, "Yo-yo, I've already sent Reina for treatment. I sold our house and bought another one in Shiyuan. It's decorated according to your preferences. We can move in after a while." His words made my frown deepen. I interrupted him and said, "Ryan, what on earth do you want to say?" Ryan looked at me, his eyes full of complexity. He said, "Yo-yo, shall we start over?" This was quite ridiculous, and I really laughed. "Ryan, are you daydreaming? Yo-yo, I love you. We've had such a long relationship. I beg you, give me one more chance. Yo-yo, I beg you." Looking at his bent back, I didn't feel anything in my heart. He said, "I know I made a terrible mistake. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. I just hope you can give me another chance to be by your side and our son's side." I sneered, "When the child was almost miscarried and I was bedridden, but you ignored us completely, you already lost your chance. Now you come to ask me for a chance? What are you asking me for when you didn't want it yourself?" Ignoring the ugly look on his face because of my words, I continued, "Since you're here, let's make it clear once and for all. This child was conceived by me, born by me, and I want him. You have no right to speak, make decisions, or interfere. Please keep your distance from him. Otherwise, I don't mind confronting you head on." Ryan looked at me, his eyes full of grief. He said in a hoarse voice, "Yo-yo, do you hate me that much? But he's also my child." "Really? But you didn't want him." "I didn't," Ryan said eagerly. "Yes, you did," I said firmly. "You didn't care when I got pregnant. You didn't protect him when someone wanted to hurt him. You didn't accompany us when I almost had a miscarriage. Even when we got divorced, did you ask one more word about what to do with the child? You didn't, because you were in a hurry to deal with the mess left by Reina. Since that's the case, you're not qualified to call yourself his father. Ryan, don't come to disturb our lives anymore." When Ryan left, He seemed to have lost his soul. Mom looked like she wanted to say something but held back. She said, after all, Eastwood was father. What if Duo wants his father when he grows up? Looking at my son sleeping soundly in the crib, I raised my hand and pinched his face. If when he grows up, he's willing to forgive and recognize him, then let him continue this father-son bond. But as for me, I won't forgive. The story between Ryan and me has ended. From now on, we part amicably. May we each find our own happiness.